Part 1, Lecture 1. We come to know what it means to think when we ourselves try to think. If the attempt is to be successful, we must be ready to learn thinking. As soon as we allow ourselves to become involved in such learning, we have admitted that we are not yet capable of thinking. Yet man is called the being who can think, and rightly so. Man is the rational animal. Reason, ratio, evolves in thinking. Being the rational animal, man must be capable of thinking if he really wants to. Still, it may be that man wants to think but can't. Perhaps he wants too much when he wants to think, and so he can do too little. Man can think in the sense that he possesses the possibility to do so. This possibility alone, however, is no guarantee to us that we are capable of thinking. For we are capable of doing only what we are inclined to do. And again, we truly incline only towards something that in turn inclines toward us, towards our essential being, by appealing to our essential being as the keeper who holds us in our essential being. What keeps us in our essential nature holds us only so long, however, as we, for our part, keep holding on to what holds us. And we keep holding on to it by not letting it out of our memory. Memory is the gathering of thought. Thought of what? Thought of what holds us, and that we give it thought precisely because it remains what must be thought about. Thought has the gift of thinking back. A gift given because we incline toward it. Only when we are so inclined towards what in itself is to be thought about, only then are we capable of thinking. In order to be capable of thinking, we need to learn it first. What is learning? Man learns when he disposes everything he does so that it answers to whatever essentials are addressed to him at any given moment. We learn to think by giving our mind to what there is to think about. What is essential in a friend, for example, is what we call friendly. In the same sense, we now call thought-provoking what in itself is to be thought about. Everything thought-provoking gives us to think, but it always gives that gift just so far as the thought-provoking matter already is intrinsically what must be thought about. From now on, we will call most thought-provoking what remains to be thought about always, because it is at the beginning, before all else. What is the most thought-provoking? How does it show itself in our thought-provoking time? Most thought-provoking is that we are still not thinking. Not even yet, although the state of the world is becoming constantly more thought-provoking. True, this course of events seems to demand rather that man should act without delay, instead of making speeches at conferences and international conventions, and never getting beyond proposing ideas on what ought to be and how it ought to be done. What is lacking, then, is action, not thought. And yet, it could be that prevailing man has for centuries now acted too much and thought too little. But how dare anyone assert today that we are still not thinking, today when there is everywhere a lively and constantly more audible interest in philosophy, when almost everybody claims to know what philosophy is all about? Philosophers are the thinkers par excellence. They are called thinkers precisely because thinking properly takes place in philosophy. Nobody will deny that there is an interest in philosophy today. But is there anything at all left today in which man does not take an interest? In the sense of which he understands interest? Interest. Interesse means to be among and in the midst of things, or to be at the center of a thing and to stay with it. But today's interest accepts as valid only what is interesting. And interesting is the sort of thing that can freely be regarded as indifferent the next moment and be displaced by something else, which then concerns us just as little as what went before. Many people today take the view that they are doing great honor to something by finding it interesting. The truth is that such an opinion has already relegated the interesting thing to the ranks of what is indifferent and soon boring. There is no evidence of any readiness to think that people show an interest in philosophy. There is, of course, serious preoccupation everywhere with philosophy and its problems. The learned world is expending commendable efforts in the investigation of the history of philosophy. These are useful and worthy tasks, and only the best talents are good enough for them, especially when they present to us models of great thinking. But even if we have devoted many years to the intensive study of the treatises and writings of the great thinkers, that fact is still no guarantee that we ourselves are thinking, or that we're even ready to think, to learn thinking. On the contrary, preoccupation with philosophy, more than anything else, may give us the stubborn illusion that we are thinking just because we are incessantly philosophizing. Even so, it remains strange and seems presumptuous to assert that what is most thought-provoking in our thought-provoking time is that we are still not thinking. Accordingly, we must prove the assertion. Even more advisable is first to explain it. For it could be that the demand for a proof collapses as soon as enough light is shed on what the assertion says. It runs, most thought-provoking in our thought-provoking time is that we are still not thinking. It has been suggested earlier how the term thought-provoking is to be understood. Thought-provoking is what gives us to think. Let us look at it closely, and from the start allow each word its proper weight. Some things are food for thought in themselves, intrinsically, so to speak, innately. And some things make an appeal to us to give them thought, to turn toward them in thought, to think them. What is thought-provoking? What gives us to think is then not anything that we determine, not anything that only we are instituting, only we are proposing. According to our assertion, what of itself gives us most to think about, what is most thought-provoking is this, that we are still not thinking. This now means we have still not come face to face, have not yet come under the sway of what intrinsically desires to be thought about in an essential sense. Presumably, the reason is that we human beings do not yet sufficiently reach out and turn toward what desires to be thought. If so, the fact that we are still not thinking would merely be a slowness, a delay in thinking, or, at most, a neglect on man's part. Such human tardiness could then be cured in human ways by the appropriate measures. Human neglect would give us food for thought, but only in passing. The fact that we are still not thinking would be thought-provoking, of course, but being a momentary and curable condition of modern man, it could never be called the one most thought-provoking matter. Yet that is what we call it, and we suggest thereby the following, that we are still not thinking is by no means only because man does not yet turn sufficiently towards that which, by origin and innately, wants to be thought about, since in its essence it remains what must be thought about. Rather, that we are still not thinking stems from the fact that the thing itself that must be thought about turns away from man, has turned away long ago. We'll want to know at once when that event took place. Even before that, we'll ask still more urgently how we could possibly know of any such event. And finally, the problems which further lie in wait come rushing at us when we add still further, that which really gives us food for thought did not turn away from man at some time or other which can be fixed in history. No. What really must be thought keeps itself turned away from man since the beginning. On the other hand, in our era, man has always thought in some way. In fact, man has thought the profoundest thoughts and entrusted them to memory. By thinking in that way, he did and does remain related to what must be thought. And yet man is not capable of really thinking as long as that which must be thought about withdraws. If we, as we are here and now, will not be taken in by empty talk, we must retort that everything said so far is an unbroken chain of hollow assertions, and state that, besides, what has been presented here has nothing to do with scientific knowledge. It will be well to maintain as long as possible such a defensive attitude toward what has been said. Only in that attitude do we keep the distance needed for a quick running dash by which one or the other of us may succeed in making the leap into thinking. For it is true that what was said so far, and the entire discussion that is to follow, have nothing to do with scientific knowledge, especially not if the discussion itself is to be a thinking. The situation is grounded in the fact that science itself does not think and cannot think, which is its good fortune, here meaning the assurance of its own appointed course. Science does not think. This is a shocking statement. Let the statement be shocking, even though we immediately add the supplementary statement that nonetheless science always, in its own fashion, has to do with thinking. That fashion, however, is genuine and consequently fruitful only after the gulf has become visible that lies between thinking and the sciences, lies there unbridgeably. There is no bridge here, only the leap. Hence there is nothing but mischief in all the makeshift ties and asses' bridges by which men today would set up a comfortable commerce between thinking and the sciences. Hence we, those of us who come from the sciences, must endure what is shocking and strange about thinking, assuming we are ready to learn thinking. To learn means to make everything we do answer to whatever essentials address themselves to us at the given moment. In order to be capable of doing so, we must get underway. It is important above all that on the way on which we set out when we learn to think, we do not deceive ourselves and rashly bypass the pressing questions. On the contrary, we must allow ourselves to become involved in questions that seek what no inventiveness can find. Especially we moderns can learn only if we always unlearn at the same time. Applied to the matter before us, we can learn thinking only if we radically unlearn what thinking has been traditionally. To do that, we must at the same time come to know it. We said, man still does not think, and this because what must be thought about turns away from him. By no means only because man does not sufficiently reach out and turn to what is to be thought. What must be thought about turns away from man. It withdraws from him. But how can we have the least knowledge of something that withdraws from the beginning? How can we even give it a name? Whatever withdraws refuses a rival. But withdrawing is not nothing. Withdrawal is an event. In fact, what withdraws may even concern and claim man more essentially than anything present that strikes and touches him. Being struck by actuality is what we like to regard as constitutive of the actuality of the actual. However, in being struck by what is actual, man may be debarred precisely from what concerns and touches him in the surely mysterious way of escaping him by its withdrawal. The event of withdrawal could be what is most present in all our present, and so infinitely exceed the actuality of everything actual. What withdraws from us draws us along by its very withdrawal, whether or not we become aware of it immediately or at all. Once we are drawn into the withdrawal, we are drawing towards what draws, attracts us by its withdrawal. And once we, being so attracted, are drawing towards what draws us, our essential nature already bears the stamp of drawing toward. As we are drawing toward what withdraws, we ourselves are pointers, pointing toward it. We are who we are by pointing in that direction, not like an incidental adjunct, but as follows. This drawing toward is in itself an essential and therefore constant pointing toward what withdraws. To say drawing toward is to say pointing toward what withdraws. To the extent that man is drawing that way, he points toward what withdraws. As he is pointing that way, man is the pointer. Man here is not first of all man, and then also occasionally someone who points. No. Drawn into what withdraws, drawing towards it, and thus pointing into the withdrawal, man first is man. His essential nature lies in being such a pointer. Something which in itself, by its essential nature, is pointing, we call a sign. As he draws toward what withdraws, man is a sign. But since this sign points towards what draws away, it points not so much as what draws away as into the withdrawal. The sign stays without interpretation. In a draft to one of his hymns, Holderlin writes, "We are a sign that is not read." He continues with these two lines. "We feel no pain. We have almost lost our tongue in foreign lands." The several drafts of that hymn, besides bearing titles such as the serpent, the sign, the nymph, also includes the title Mnemosyne. This Greek word may be translated memory. And since the Greek word is feminine, we're not breaking any rules if we translate it as dame memory. For Holderlin uses the Greek word Mnemosyne as the name of a titaness. According to the myth, she is the daughter of heaven and earth. Myth means the telling word. For the Greeks, to tell is to lay bare and make appear, both the appearance and that which has its essence in the appearance, its epiphany. Muthos is what has its essence in its telling, what is apparent in the unconcealedness of its appeal. The muthos of that appeal is foremost and radical concern to all human beings, which makes man think of what appears, what is in being. Logos says the same. Muthos and logos are not, as our current historians of philosophy claim, placed into opposition by philosophy as such. On the contrary, the early Greek thinkers, Parmenides Fragment 8, are precisely the ones to use muthos and logos in the same sense. Muthos and logos become separated and opposed only at the point where neither muthos nor logos can keep to its original nature. In Plato's work, this separation has already taken place. Historians and philologists, by virtue of a prejudice which modern rationalism adopted from Platonism, imagine that muthos was destroyed by logic. But nothing religious is ever destroyed by logic. It is just destroyed only by the god's withdrawal. Mnemosyne, daughter of heaven and earth, bride of Zeus, in 9 nights becomes the mother of the 9 muses. Drama and music, dance and poetry are of the womb of Mnemosyne, Dame Memory. It is plain that the word means something else than merely the psychologically demonstrable ability to retain a mental representation, an idea, or something which is past. Memory, from the Latin memor, mindful, has in mind something that is in the mind, thought. But when it is the name of the mother of the muses, memory does not mean just any thought of anything that can be thought. Memory is the gathering and convergence of thought upon what every word demands to be thought about first of all. Memory is the gathering of recollection, thinking back. It safely keeps concealed within it that to which at each given time thought must be given before all else, and in everything that essentially is, everything that appeals to us as what has being and has been in being. Memory, mother of the muses. The thinking back to what is to be thought is the source and ground of poesy. This is why poesy is the water that at times flows backwards towards the source, toward thinking as a thinking back, a recollection. Surely, as long as we take the view that logic gives us any information about what thinking is, we shall never be able to think how much all poesy rests upon thinking back, recollection. Poetry wells up only from devoted thought thinking back, recollecting. Under the heading Mnemosyne, Holderlin says, "We are a sign that is not read." We? Who? We, the men of today, of a today that has lasted since long ago and will still last for a long time, so long that no calendar in history can give its measure. In the same hymn, Mnemosyne, it says, long is the time in which we are a sign that is not read. And this, that we are a sign that is not read, does this not give enough food for thought? What the poet says in these words and those that follow may have a part in showing us what is most thought-provoking, precisely what the assertion about our thought-provoking time attempts to think of. And that assertion, provided only we explain it properly, may throw some little light upon us upon the poet's word. Holderlin's word, in turn, because it is a word of poesy, may summon us with a larger appeal, and hence greater allure, upon a way of thought that tracks in thought what is most thought-provoking. Even so, it is as yet obscure what purpose this reference to the words of Holderlin is supposed to serve. It is still questionable with what right we, by way of an attempt to think, make mention of a poet, this poet in particular. And it is also still unclear upon what grounds and within what limits our reference to the poetic must remain. Summary and transition. By way of this series of lectures, we are attempting to learn thinking. The way is long. We dare take only a few steps. If all goes well, they will take us to the foothills of thought, but they will take us to places which we must explore to reach the point where only the leap will help further. The leap alone takes us into the neighborhood where thinking resides. We therefore shall take a few practice leaps right at the start, though we won't notice it at once or need to. In contrast to a steady progress, where we move unawares from one thing to the next and everything remains alike, the leap takes us abruptly to where everything is different, so different that it strikes us as strange. Abrupt means the sudden sheer descent or rise that marks the chasm's edge. Though we may not founder in such a leap, what the leap takes us to will confound us. It is quite in order, then, that we receive notice from the very start of what will confound us. But all would not be well if the strangeness were due only to the fact that you, the listeners, are not yet listening closely enough. If that were the case, you would be bound to overlook completely the strangeness which lies in the matter itself. The matter of thinking is always confounding, all the more in proportion as we keep clear of prejudice. To keep clear of prejudice, we must be ready and willing to listen. Such readiness allows us to surmount the boundaries in which all customary views are confined, and to reach a more open territory. In order to encourage such readiness, I shall insert here some transitional remarks, which will also apply to all subsequent lectures. In the universities especially, the danger is still very great that we misunderstand what we hear of thinking, particularly if the immediate subject of the discussion is scientific. Is there any place compelling us more forcibly to rack our brains than the research and training institutions pursuing scientific labors? Now, everyone admits unreservedly that the arts and the sciences are totally different from each other, though in official oratory they are still mentioned jointly. But if a distinction is made between thinking and the sciences, and the two are contrasted, that is immediately considered a disparagement of science. There is a fear, even, that thinking might open hostilities against the sciences and becloud the seriousness and spoil the joy of scientific work. But even if those fears were justified, which is emphatically not the case, it would still be both tactless and tasteless to take a stand against science upon the very rostrum that serves scientific education. Tact alone ought to prevent all polemics here. But there's another consideration as well. Any kind of polemics fails from the outset to assume the attitude of thinking. The opponent's role is not the thinking role. Thinking is thinking only when it pursues whatever speaks for a subject. Everything said here defensively is always intended exclusively to protect the subject. When we speak of the sciences as we pursue our way, we shall be speaking not against, but for them, for clarity concerning their essential nature. This alone implies our conviction that the sciences are in themselves positively essential. However, their essence is frankly of a different sort from what our universities today still fondly imagine it to be. In any case, we still seem afraid of facing the exciting fact that today's sciences belong in the realm of the essence of modern technology and nowhere else. Be it noted that I am saying in the realm of the essence of technology and not simply in technology. A fog still surrounds the essence of modern sciences. That fog, however, is not produced by individual investigators and scholars in the sciences. It is not produced by man at all. It arises from the region of what is most thought-provoking, that we are still not thinking. None of us, including me who speaks to you. Me first of all. This is why we are here, attempting to learn thinking. We are all on the way together and are not reproving each other. To learn means to make everything we do answer to whatever essentials address themselves to us at a given time. Depending on the kind of essentials, depending on the realm from which they address us, the answer, and with it the kind of learning, differs. A cabinet maker's apprentice. Someone who is learning to build cabinets and the like will serve as an example. His learning is not mere practice to gain facility in the use of tools, nor does he merely gather knowledge about the customary forms of the things he's going to build. If he is to become a true cabinet maker, he makes himself answer and respond above all to the different kinds of wood, and to the shapes slumbering within wood, to wood as it enters into man's dwelling with all the hidden richness of its nature. In fact, this relatedness to wood is what maintains the whole craft. Without that relatedness, the craft will never be anything but empty busywork, and occupation with it will be determined exclusively by business concerns. Every handicraft, all human dealings are constantly in that danger. The writing of poetry is no more exempt from it than his thinking. Whether or not a cabinet maker's apprentice, while he is learning, will come to respond to wood and wooden things depends obviously on the presence of some teacher who can make the apprentice comprehend. True. Teaching is even more difficult than learning. We know that, but we rarely think about it. And why is teaching more difficult than learning? Not because the teacher must have a larger store of information and have it always ready. Teaching is more difficult than learning because what teaching calls for is this: to let learn. The real teacher, in fact, lets nothing else be learned than learning. His conduct, therefore, often produces the impression that we properly learn nothing from him, if by learning we now suddenly understand merely the procurement of useful information. The teacher is ahead of his apprentices in this alone, that he has still far more to learn than they. He has to learn to let them learn. The teacher must be capable of being more teachable than the apprentices. The teacher is far less assured of his ground than those who learn are of theirs. If the relation between the teacher and the taught is genuine, therefore, there is never a place in it for the authority of the know-it-all or the authoritative sway of the official. It is still an exalted matter, then, to become a teacher, which is something else entirely than becoming a famous professor. That nobody wants any longer to become a teacher today, when all the things are downgraded and graded from below, for instance from business, is presumably because the matter is exalted, because of its altitude. And presumably this distinction is linked to that most thought-provoking matter which gives us to think. We must keep our eyes fixed firmly on the true relation between teacher and taught, if indeed learning is to arise in the course of these lectures. We are trying to learn thinking. Perhaps thinking, too, is just something like building a cabinet. At any rate, it is a craft, a handicraft. Craft literally means the strength and skill of our hands. The hand is a peculiar thing. In the common view, the hand is part of our bodily organism, but the hand's essence can never be determined or explained by its being an organ which can grasp. Apes, too, have organs that can grasp, but they don't have hands. The hand is infinitely different from all grasping organs, paws, claws, or fangs, different by an abyss of essence. Only a being who can speak, that is, think, can have hands and be handy in achieving the works of handicraft. But the craft of the hand is richer than we commonly imagine. The hand does not only grasp and catch or push and pull. The hand reaches and extends, receives and welcomes. And not just things. The hand extends itself and receives its own welcome in the hands of others. The hand holds. The hand carries. The hand designs and signs, presumably because man is a sign. Two hands folded into one. A gesture meant to carry man into the great oneness. The hand is all this, and this is the true handicraft. Everything is rooted here that is commonly known as handicraft, and commonly we go no further. But the hand's gestures run everywhere through language, in their most perfect purity precisely when man speaks by being silent, and only when man speaks does he think, not the other way around, as metaphysics still believes. Every motion of the hand in every one of its works carries itself through the element of thinking. Every bearing of the hand bears itself in that element. All the work of the hand is rooted in thinking. Therefore, thinking itself is man's simplest, and for that reason hardest, handiwork, if it would be accomplished at its proper time. We must learn thinking because our being able to think, and even gifted for it, is still no guarantee that we are capable of thinking. To be capable, we must before all else incline towards what addresses itself to thought, and that is that which gives of itself food for thought. What gives us this gift, the gift of what must properly be thought about, is what we call most thought-provoking. Our answer to the question, what the most thought-provoking thing might be, is this assertion. Most thought-provoking for our thought-provoking time is that we are still not thinking. The reason is never exclusively or primarily that we men do not sufficiently reach out and turn toward what properly gives food for thought. The reason is that this most thought-provoking thing turns away from us. In fact, has long since turned away from it, man. And what withdraws in such a manner keeps and develops its own incomparable nearness. Once we are so related and drawn to what withdraws, we are drawing into what withdraws, into the enigmatic and therefore mutable nearness of its appeal. Whenever man is properly drawing that way, he is thinking. Even though he may still be far away from what withdraws, even though the withdrawal may remain as veiled as ever. All through his life and right into his death, Socrates did nothing else than place himself into this draft, this current, and maintain himself in it. This is why he is the purest thinker of the West. This is why he wrote nothing. For anyone who begins to write out of thoughtfulness must inevitably be like those people who run to seek refuge from any draft that's too strong for them. An as yet hidden history still keeps the secret why all great Western thinkers after Socrates, with all their greatness, had to be such fugitives. Thinking has entered into literature, and literature has decided the fate of Western science, which, by way of the doctrina of the Middle Ages, became the scientia of modern times. In this form, all the sciences have leapt from the womb of philosophy in a twofold manner. The sciences come out of philosophy because they have to part with her. And now that they are so apart, they can never again, by their own power as sciences, make the leap back into the source from which they have sprung. Henceforth, they are remanded to a realm of being where only thinking can find them, provided thinking is capable of doing what is its own to do. When man is drawing into what withdraws, he points into what withdraws. As we are drawing this way, we are a sign, a pointer. But we are pointing then at something which has not yet, been transposed into the language of our speech. We are a sign that is not read. In the draft for the hymn Mnemosyne, Memory, Hölderlin says, "We are a sign that is not read. We feel no pain. We have almost lost our tongue in foreign lands. And so, on our way toward thinking, we hear a word of poesy. But the question to what end and with what right, upon what ground and within what limits, our attempt to think allows itself to get involved in a dialogue with poesy, let alone with the poetry of this poet, this question, which is inescapable, we can discuss only after we ourselves have undertaken the path of thinking."